In a being who has become alive, the mind is no longer thought. Rather, it is activity that instantly determines reality through images. Through images, the Magus creates, destroys, transforms into matter the feelings and sensations that are within himself. Through images, he acts on his own organism. Through images, he operates on other humans. To the actions and will of ordinary humans, he substitutes the power of the image. But to do so, one must awaken to a timeless speed in feeling, conceiving, halting, and intervening. The ordinary slow and dull consciousness perceives things at the speed of a sleepwalker. Acts escape it. Consciousness opens its eyes only when the leader or results of an event are already tangible. What consciousness perceives are only the shadows of phenomena, and a world of knowledge as mere acknowledgement, not of true action. Magic. Hermeticism equates action with magic. In the same way, you experience what you call the inner world as merely the reflection of external phenomena. Its archetype is lunar. You do not know the image as living action, but only as a passive picture. Its true action is too swift, you are not present within it. Like a mere echo, the image either appears on its own or is simply evoked. You remain unaware of the creative relationship that would allow it to act from the depths of yourself. The English word image derives from the Latin imago, which in turn comes from the root imo-ago, meaning I act from the depth. To acquire and perceive this rapidity of what is not yet physical, the mind must succeed in wrestling itself free from the organ of the brain. The necessary condition for this is, in alchemical terms, to descend into hell, from the head into the heart, quite literally. This is also the bath that breaks the chains of gold and frees it, drawing out of it the winged hermetic alchemical symbol of rapidity, which corresponds to the antelope, which in Hindu esotericism refers to the subtle center of the heart. You already know that this descent leads to the perception of the subtle and the volatile, but the subtle is the second dimension of reality, in which reality is no longer exteriority in space and time or rambling thought, but rather activity and rhythm. Then you are reborn backwards, no longer hypnotized by the spectacle of things and ideas. You can detach yourself from them and perceive them in the act of their supernatural birth. However, this is a consciousness in which the image is transformed into a projection, or into an action in the pure state. Will is effort. Desire is the tendency toward something that one does not have. The force is a middle point between a goal and a reality, into which it tries to be transformed by overcoming a resistance. In the magical image, on the other hand, there is no effort, nor striving, nor an interval of fulfillment. It is acting that amounts to seeing, and a seeing that amounts to acting. The process of ideation is realization, ipso facto, by the very fact. It does not have a future, and it is more rapid than the antithesis. Its law is, it is. The command presence. So the image is the fiery, winged instant in which the depths of the self become reality without mediation. It is the magical gesture before gesture, the word before the word is spoken, the lightning that is simultaneously flash and thunder. The image is the vehicle by which reality is determined the very instant it arises. Through images, you can successfully stand up to feelings and passions whenever they descend upon you, a struggling ascetic. If desire, fear, anger, sensations, hatred, lust all of a sudden appeared in your mind, in your temperament and will, jump back and fix the feeling in an image, act upon it, and the mental act will produce transformation and annihilation in the corresponding element. We read, for instance, in the Majjhima Nikaya, Chapter 20, the metaphor of a young man who all of a sudden realized he had the rotting corpse of a serpent or a dog or another human being wrapped around his neck. Scared and overwhelmed with disgust, he rips it off and throws it away. The feeling needs to be quickly associated with the image of a corpse, while the mind realizes the horror of the situation and the gesture of ripping it off and throwing it away. The mental act, when it is strengthened in a material action, generates ritual and symbolic practice. I will discuss this later, though if you have watched my previous videos, you may already know the meaning of it. In some mountains of northern Africa, there are found little mounds of stones, which are considered to be saturated with an evil power. They have been created by a materialization of the mental act, with which, by fixing the effort of the ascent in the image of a stone, this very stone is hurled away. Or how certain Jews practice ritual sacrifices of chickens, the kaparot. By transferring any perceived sins or evil thoughts to the chicken in the exact manner I've mentioned before, and to then promptly kill it. Create any thought or image of negation, mistrust, distraction, or that you simply do not wish to entertain it, and immediately imagine a hand pulling out a splint in your skin and throwing it away. And if the element has already entered and leeches off your strength, get rid of it, like a strong man grabbing a weaker man by the shoulders, forces him, crushes him, throws him down. If a pain, an illness, or fatigue overtakes you, fix it in a flake of snow that melts when it falls on a piece of glowing white-hot metal. If any anxiety, restlessness, desire, or mental fever attack you, turn them into the shadow of smoke that, in the fire of the mind, is dispersed in the pure, clean, blue sky. The mind is fixed through the image of a fist that holds a little defenseless animal until it stays still or motionless, or through the image of an arrow that shot at its target, or that of an ever-present sword that always parries every blow, or a hand that systematically grabs and leads the unstable mind, which wants to run away with every involuntary thought, back to its proper place at the center. You now have the key to both directions of the image, to create and manifest. Fully inhabit the desired image, let the pure emotion run without contradiction. To dissolve and purify, instantly fix the unwanted passion in a repulsive or liberating image and enact its annihilation. In order to free the mind, imagine the open sky, the air, or remember that, like a deep, clear and transparent lake, this is how the wise become calm. Dhammapada, chapter 6, verse 82. Or that all desires flow into him as waters flow into the ocean, which, ever filled, never overflows, but remains unchanged. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 70. About all of this, be aware that first, it is necessary to stop a thought or a feeling as soon as it emerges. It must be caught in midair before it puts down roots in your soul and spreads there. You must prevent it, suffocate it, while it's still an embryo. Become agile, elusive, ready to detach and extract yourself. Second, notice how good practice leads you back to the preparation of the Kadu chaos. The emotional state acts like a fluid mercury that is fixed in the image, which is then ignified by the mental act. In other words, everything depends on the rapid and complete fusion of sentiment and image, and on the active attitude to be maintained before the image. The entire mind must be concentrated on this image, like a bundle of solar rays is sucked into the focus of a lens. In theurgical invocations, every image expressing the attributes of entities or deities must be actualized in the fluid substance of your entire being. The mind will shift from one to the next, performing a series of transformations that serve to produce the necessary exaltation, so that sympathy and communication may be established. A general image of great power is that of a dark body that is consumed and falls, yielding its place to a body of radiant light and glorious strength. This image actually flashes in every moment of sudden or mortal danger, in an instant too fast for ordinary human consciousness to perceive. It rises then, restoring and transmitting strength to the organism just as the latter abandons itself and falls into sleep. There is another image of such great power that it may overwhelm hostile forces even in the body. The image of a gigantic white skeleton made of lightning bolts. If you persevere in these practices, you will grow in the knowledge that thoughts and feelings are not incorporeal and spiritual floating in the air, but rather almost tangible moving objects which can be handled, moved, projected, changed, put down, loaded and unloaded, each one endowed with its own form. This form can be seen and derives from the sign of the being that emanates those thoughts or feelings. Magical images can certainly be invented, but understand how vastly more effective are those that correspond to the true forms and real signs of the states they fix. Those who truly see can suggest images that offer far greater leverage in mental magic. The Magus has denied, exhausted, and extinguished everything in his feeling and will that is craving or aversion, sympathy or antipathy, mania or affirmation, attachment, selfishness, or instinctive reaction. Being endowed with a steady, calm, collected, impassible mind, the Magus, with a sorrowing glance, sees as figures the feelings that have descended upon him or on other people he is looking at. He can act directly on these images at will. It is often enough for his mind to assume them and to project them transformed, or for his eye to change them with a glance of command, to produce a corresponding change in the soul of the other person. Likewise, if he wishes, he can evoke in himself the image of a certain feeling, turn it on, and saturate it with his fluid. If then, by focusing his mind on another person and by inwardly actualizing the gesture of taking it from one place and placing it in another, he sees the image in the other person, in the heart, and that same feeling or state will be infused in them. Notice, these operations are quite volatile, leading to extreme changes of behavior towards you and those you interact with. Ordinary humans will start to feel threatened, ripped open, and vulnerable in a way they cannot describe or put into words, since these operations unmask personas or lay bare their own shadows. It arouses in them, their subconscious, a feeling that is similar to being existentially challenged. Humans hate this challenge, however, and will react with disgust, hate, and animosity, as opposed to working through it like an initiate would. Keep that in mind. And these operations remain possible even for one who has not yet attained true vision. They can be performed with images that are not real, that is, invented images that do not correspond to the true signatures, provided they possess sufficient suggestive and analogical power. Provided one knows how to firmly fix the desired element within them, and finally, provided the action does not penetrate too deeply, for then very strong resistances will arise. Finally, at its highest potency, the image stirs, inflames, and provokes resurrection even in the world of natural things. The substance of nature is desire. In intelligence and conscious will, the goal of movement is an idea, or an ideal to be fulfilled, or something that may be, yet is not. In other words, a possibility awaiting realization. But with the appearance of desire comes identification, a dark, direct contact, and necessity. It brings the act increasingly closer to the realization it is striving toward. The duration of the movement contracts. Virtuality is confused with tendency and tendency with action. With the gradual shortening of the interval separating movement and its purpose, the idea can no longer be distinguished, but is confused and precipitates in the act and in the object. It increasingly takes on the form of the being, and it becomes the being itself. Nothing now separates the agent and the action, the ideal and the real, the subject and the object. Thus intelligence that sinks in its own act, which is blind yearning, thus become an instinct, mechanism, automatism, or a vibrating and convulsive force absorbed into its objects. Such is the deep essence of what appears to you as nature. Nature is the identification of the end with the beginning of an act, the degradation of freedom into something mechanical. It is the precipitation of elementary intelligences that are lost in the blind tendency to persevere in the act that constitutes them, in the substantiality of their images. Imprisoned in the materiality of things, signs and symbols are asleep, as abysmal images of light, gestures of power and illumination that the law of yearning has obscured and crucified in the sphere of fate. And even this contraction and acceleration, by which the idea leaves the sphere of freedom and degenerates into sensation, instinct and nature, shows the timeless speed of acts across your mind without it being aware of them and retaining their perception. Thus, the mind itself sees only facts, things, beings already in a form of exteriority, of existence, and material movements in a series. These are the precipitates, in the chemical sense, of the subtle world. When you have succeeded in slaying desire, yearning, and dark striving within you, when you succeed in stopping and in fixing the irrational effort that dominates the depths of your being, and adjusted yourself to the magic rapidity and conceiving and in intervening, then you will be able to turn to an analogous realization in the sphere of nature. You will then stop in your spirit the acts of beings before they precipitate in the form of material things. At that point, you will no longer be confronted with a material world, but with a world of images, and your knowledge will consist in action rather than passion. In your yes, love and consent, you will lift the dark forces of beings transfigured as intellectual acts. In your no, opposition dominion, by projecting your strength into the image that sustains the being's body of craving. You will create a transcendental transformation that will be translated into an invisible following of your command on the part of that which depends on that being in the order of nature. This will happen because your consecration as the released, the uprooted, the escaped one is a power of freedom that imposes itself on the demonic realm and on the law of necessity of the forces made of yearning, bringing them to a halt. Thus, as you progressively fix yourself, pulling yourself out of the waters, your capability to intercept and to maintain the various energies and impressions at their subtle state will increase. Corresponding images will naturally flow into you instead of the representation of reflected phenomena and apparitions recorded by physical senses. At first, the images of your inner psychological world, thoughts and feelings, and your own figure. Then more deeply, the images buried within the organs and movements of your body. Deeper yet, the signs of the kingdoms, the natural and stellar forces and influences, the 12 and the 7. And if it will be given to you to achieve adeptship, nothing will ever be able to act directly and contingently on you. Everything will confront you in the sudden apparition of an image that tries to be accepted and willed. The same will happen with fatigue, love, sickness, sleep, and what gradually awakens and arises from the subterranean realm of instinct and physiological automatism. According to the law of necessity, the only images that will be allowed to overpower you are those images that your mind is unable to hold onto in order to transform its obscurely demonic nature, its blind spontaneity, into sun.